the integration cards. What are integration cards and which ones do we support right now? So we support right now the table type, the list type, the object type, and the timeline type. This is what Neptune supports. So to start with, they are ABAP based. If you don't know, integration cards from SAP do not connect to the data, they connect to JSON. They are basically JSON based, which is divided into a manifest that tells how the card should be rendered, and a low payload, which is the actual data that will be displayed within the card. But how is it ABAP based? So let's start, before we show you live exactly the process of building an integration card and added it to a launchpad, how does this work? So first of all, you have to build an ABAP class to provide the data. And we facilitate patterns for you to build this ABAP class. Then Neptune automates the creation of a REST API on top of the ABAP class. And this is no code after that. So every single piece of code that you have to do to build an integration card with Neptune is ABAP. You only need ABAP. Everything else is automated. So the REST API is generated. And then, of course, the result of the REST API is JSON with manifest and the payload with the data. This is part of a bigger framework, which we call the API factory. And in the very end, you have an integration card. So having this said, let's go and let's build one. So Torsten, I'll make you the presenter. So Torsten, you are the provider now. Great, we can see your screen.
You see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Yes, thanks for the nice introduction. So the main part to note is that really those integration cards are built with no real JavaScript coding on front-end part. It's defined the look and feel, and how the data is applied is really defined with the so-called manifest JSON. So it's like the structure of, so you can take a look at the SAP Card Explorer here. I'm inside here. And there you see, this is an example of the manifest JSON. So basically, it's a structure, how this card is then being rendered. So also it defines the card type. So there's some card types available from SAP. And so what we need to do now in our example is we need a way to generate this manifest JSON. And this is done with plain ABAP. And also we want to supply it as a REST API. So that's why we are using the API factory for that. And one important note to mention here as well is that when you are building the integration card, or specifically the manifest of the integration card, you can decide whether you want to embed the actual data inside that manifest JSON, or you can split it up with another REST API call. So then in that case, the manifest is simply some kind of skeleton, and you're telling inside the manifest, where is the endpoint for my data? So that's really a nice way where you decouple the data of the integration card from the look and feel definition. And the last point to note in the beginning here is that all cards are split up. They are divided with a header. So you have this header part of the integration card, and also then the content section, which then is defined with those card types. So what we want to do now is create with the API factory an ABAP class, which will return as a REST API this manifest JSON. And we want to decouple the data for that integration card, meaning that we will also create a REST API for the data of the header separately, and the content and the data for the content section. So we will basically create one class, which is a REST API, and this class will have 3 endpoints. So manifest will be returned, header data will be returned, and content data will be returned. So enough about theory, let's jump into our system. So we are now in our template system, and to make it very easy for you to generate this API factory class, we will provide you a wizard for doing this. So it's basically a transaction. You simply open this transaction.
Yeah,
And
just one thing. There was a question here, Torsten, about you only see JSON on integration cards. Well,
yes.
the automation of the generation of the JSON, it's done through ABAP, and you're doing that without having to manipulate ABAP or JSON. So that's what we are going to show you right now, because there was a question on that.
Exactly, yeah. So the JSON is built with a JSON framework we are also supplying, and that's actually the same framework we're using for building the Swagger specification, which is as well a very complex JSON structure. So we are reusing that here. So yeah, when you're starting the wizard, you're being guided through some information which is needed to build now the API, and everything is tried to be explained in very detail here in the top section. So what we have to do now is define an ABAP class name for the REST API. So we are choosing now setCLIC webinar. Now you would have the possibility to define also tags. This is optional, and tags are used in Swagger, in the Swagger UI, to group endpoints more nicely together. But let's skip that for now. And now what we have to do is we have to define the endpoints. So as I said, we need 3 endpoints for the manifest, header data, and content data. And all of those endpoints are being represented as a ABAP method of the class we defined earlier. So we will now tell the wizard we need 3 endpoints. We need 1 endpoint for the manifest. And if we would have created multiple tags, we could choose which tag we want to assign to that endpoint. We also want to return the header of the integration card. And also, of course, the content. So, and also what's important is we will supply those endpoints as GET operations. You can here choose between all HTTP operations available. And yeah, so you define simply a GET here in that example. Let's continue. So now a technical question is coming up. So in order for our API factory framework to know whether you want a GET, a POST, a PUT, or delete, our framework will now group the endpoints which belong to the same HTTP operation under one interface. So right now he's asking us, which name do you want to give for that interface which groups all GET requests? And yeah, it's already populating an example for us. That's totally fine. Let's simply continue. And now we basically defined what we want with our API factory. We click on complete. And what's now happening is the interface and the ABAP class is being generated. So for this demo purpose, we simply create local objects. Of course, you can assign packages and transport them. So now sticking with local objects. And the last step then of this is it will automatically jump into the object navigator, object ABAP development workbench. So that's the SE80 transaction of SAP. And it will also directly navigate you to the generated class. So what you see, we have now our class. And we also have this interface directly implemented by that class and our 3 endpoints. So if I now jump into one of those and simply activate the whole class, our REST API is basically defined. So the difference between the API designer and the API factory is there's no step in between. The class itself defines the API. So it's really completely ABAP based. And what you can also see is the description of those endpoints. It's simply the description of the method. So reusing everything we have in ABAP and transporting that information to the outside world with Swagger UI. So now let's take a look in our cockpit. So you will find a new application under the connectivity node and the REST API node. We will ship you the API factory as a cockpit application. And what you see here is that automatically, since we created the class, it's showing up here. So ZCLIC, let's see, it's ZCLIC webinar, and that's exactly showing up here. So you don't create the API in the cockpit. You simply define the ABAP class, and then the framework knows, okay, this is now an API. Clicking into the details of it, you're presented how the path of the REST API will look like. So it's our Neptune API endpoint, and we will ship another subnode, SICF subnode called dynamic. And after that, then the class name will be the root of this specific REST API. So what you will get out of the box now is a Swagger UI. So when I click on that, we have one thing missing now. Because it's such a flexible and powerful tool, you have to enable this API first with our policies. So we don't want, when you simply create a class with coding, that everybody is now able to call that. You have to simply assign policies to really restrict the access to that endpoint and to that API. And for this demo, what we will do is we will simply going for the big switch here, which is making it visible to everybody. And now when I save that, I should be able to see the Swagger. So I click now on Swagger, and you see here we have our REST API ready for being tested. So what we now need to do is we need to get the code for this manifest generation. So how should this be easily done inside our world here in our Neptune world? We will go into the manifest method. And what's important to know is that the signature, the method signature, defines actually the parameters of that REST API. So in contradiction to the API designer, where you normally assign public attributes as a communication signature, you really define this, the signature of the method will basically be the parameters being received and returned from that REST API. So what we are shipping you as well is inside that coding area, we are shipping you a pattern which generates not only the integration card generation, but also example demo data. So you don't have to care about which data should I put in for an example. This will also be shipped. So clicking now on the pattern here, what we will ship is a so-called other pattern where you can define custom patterns in SAP. And there you will see that there's the IC wizard available. And that's actually the wizard which guides you through the integration card code. So let's do that now. Basically, same look and feel. It's an ABAP wizard. And first of all, starting off, you have to decide which card type do I want to generate now. So is it going to be a list, a table, an object, or timeline? So those four are supported right now. We keep on integrating new ones there as well. And also you have to choose the header type of the card. So as you can see in the card explorer, there are those two header types. So you can now define if I want to go with the default one or the numeric one. So let's skip with the numeric one. That looks quite nice, and simply use the list card type here in that example. So now the wizard is asking you, as I said earlier, you can define whether you want to supply the payload data inside the manifest itself, or what's the nicer approach is to supply it with another REST API call. So you are being asked now in the two sections we have, the header and the content section, whether you want to embed the payload inside the manifest we are about to generate, or you want to split it up in another REST API. So that's the nicer way. And also what you can define is you can tell in a card, in an integration card, if you want to supply the data as a whole, so the header and the content together, or you want to split it up. So I like the nicer way is splitting it up, because when you do that, you can also define different update intervals for the calls on the header and the content area. So that's quite nice. And again, here everything is explained in detail. So let's skip with the default values parameters here. And this is now the final screen already. You see it was super easy. And it will also generate example data for you. So it's telling you now, please watch out for those example blocks. We now need to split the code we will get into our 3 corresponding methods. So that's simply the task you have to do now is click on complete. And if we take a look, there's header example data generated and also content example data. And the very tiny part in the bottom is then the manifest creation. So we are shipping this factory class, which will then actually generate the manifest. So, and if I check now, this is already syntactically correct ABAP coding. So that's good to go now. We need to split now simply the coding blocks into our methods. So starting off with the header example data, I will copy that or cut, be more precise here. I'll cut it out of that method. We will put that into the header method. And also, as I said earlier, the example data will generate also the data elements locally. What we want now is if I would activate this coding, nothing would happen in the REST API because the data is simply put into that variable and nothing happens. We need to tell the method that it will return this data to the outer world. So we would put this declaration part here into the method signature. So I simply, and we already got the right typing for that with all the fields available for the numeric header. So what I will do now very easily is go to method definition, which brings up the signature for the method. And I would right now simply have one parameter called response body, which returns this type, this header data. So put that in here. And now what we, of course, have to do, we need to replace ls header with response body. So we will check this, and it's now syntactically correct, and we activate. So our header REST API is already done. Now we continue in the same way with the content. So this is now simply, I go a little faster here. That's exactly the same approach. We will cut the content block. We will copy the data. And also we will return this data as a return parameter here and rename this content thing with response body. Activate, that's fine. So now we have a dedicated endpoint which only returns content data and a dedicated endpoint which only returns header data. And we now want to, in the last step, create also the manifest endpoint. And here it's getting very interesting because we again do the same thing here. We will return the manifest, which is simply this integration card type we will ship. And what you need to do now is the manifest must somehow know where should it fetch the data from. So you must tell the framework now the REST API endpoints where the data is returned for the header section and for the content section. And that's super easy because you get these placeholders here. And so you have to tell the manifest the name of your class and API factory class. You as well have to tell it the name of the method, which is not the manifest. We are in the content section, that's the content. And also the name of the response parameter. And here you see that you actually would be able to have a method which returns more stuff. Not only the content for the integration card, but it's a generic method which returns data, and one of that parameter could be the content. So it's really data is decoupled from the manifest. That was wrong. And here as well for the header section, we go the same way. Also supplying the name of the method, which is now header. So, and the parameter as well, I've chosen response body here. And what's also possible, what makes it even more flexible, is you would be able to also supply parameters. So let's say you have integration card which delivers data dependently from sales organization. You can also add a parameter to your method as an importing parameter for the sales org, and the integration card then, the manifest, can supply this parameter in its own REST call. So that's to make it even more flexible. So, and as well, as I said earlier, you can define the update interval independently of the content section and the header section, and also subnode, ICF subnodes and other properties here. Let's simply activate now. And going back to our Swagger UI, I simply click on Explore again. So it's reloading. And what you see now is when I open those methods, you will see the Swagger definition already figured out what is the response parameter of that method, and it will tell you the schema of it. And we should be able to test it now. So clicking on Try Out and clicking on Execute. So you see the request. This request is a GET request being done now, and that's the response. So the method was executed, and the dummy data was put into the response body parameter. So that's working pretty cool already. Let's test the header section. We will test this as well. And the header data is also being returned nicely. That's working as well. And the third part is now the manifest. So now we need our manifest skeleton. And you see we get our manifest JSON generated by our factory class. And what's nice about this now is you see that the header section will trigger its own REST call. So it's really decoupled now. Okay, so now we have this JSON, but how can we really see if that's working now? You can simply copy this manifest JSON here, right-click copy. And what we also will ship with the next release is this integration card test application. And inside here, you have on the left side the integration card, and on the right side, the JSON input, the manifest, we will simply paste in here. And what you see is that's the result. So the manifest JSON is working fine, and the data is also looking fine. And this is also updated live. So if I would change stuff in here, the entity API call won't work. I must do it on the header section. So you see, this is a test will come up on that on that point here. So you know you can play around and see which property will reflect which section of the card. So that's how you generated the API. That's how you generate the manifest, and that's how you even decouple the data with the ability to put in even parameters for the data. So it's completely flexible in that manner. And now the point is simply to put this integration card as a tile type in our launchpad. Avinash, you want to continue there? Or
yeah. No, you can do that.
I can do that. Okay. So what we do now is simply creating a tile.
Before you just go there, there was a question here about the update parameter that you had there on the pattern that you had. There was 24. Was it there? The question is the update described by the update interval is by push or pull based?
Unfortunately, the card is really pulling data. So it's updating with that interval. Until right now, as far as I know, there's no possibility from the backend to push an update down to the card. So it's really a pull process where it's updating with that specified interval here. But that's defined in the integration card definition itself in the Card Explorer. So
okay, very good. So we can go to the tile description.
Yes. So we will create now a tile simply. So the integration card will be embedded as a tile in the Launchpad. We will create IC webinar list. So we created the list. And now what you can choose from the type that it's being integration card. So you choose integration card. And what's happening now is you have to put in three information, and that's exactly the same info you need on the backend side. So it's which class will be returning the manifest. So, and what's nice about this now is it's looking for all ABAP classes which return such a type. So the Neptune integration card is the indication for the method as being an integration card method. So you see, we now have the ability to choose that class here. And also what it will look for is how many methods do we have in that class and which of them will return a manifest. And if it's only one, everything is being pre-populated as already done here. So if I save it now, it's now active. Do we have a tile group where I can put it in?
Which tile group did you use, Avinash?
It's called webinar offers.
That one?
The second one, yeah.
Okay, so
can you unlock Avinash?
Let me come out. Yeah, now.
Thanks. So we will add IC webinar list. And this is probably already, yes, that's already in a launchpad, so we can dive into it. And when I run this now, crossing fingers, you will get your integration card. And what's now cool about it is that you, when you're looking at the dev tools, you will see these independent data requests currently with the update interval of 24 seconds. If we would wait now 24 seconds, you would see two new REST calls. There you go, for the header data and the content data, and that's really the data payload. So that's only data. It has nothing to do with the manifest. And if you think about it, it's reusing your data and decoupling it from a manifest is really an elegant way of reusability of everything.
This is really, really good, and thank you for this particular demo. But the underlying capabilities here is of the API factory. So
yes.
that's a good way to very quickly go from ABAP. And as I said, from ABAP only, you generate integration card for the pattern. We even ship it with the sample data so that you can understand better how to add your own custom BAPIs or bodies or whatever function modules, ABAP classes, whatever you want in it, so that your business logic can be directly accessed and exposed as an integration card.
Yes.
But there's more to it. There's a lot more to it.